This workshop I'm targeting to be finished in 2 hours, and it's going to be conducted as follows. In a couple of minutes, Chief Dooley is going to describe the incident that occurred on June 26th when a young man was tragically killed in Jacks Beach. And then we're going to review what actions the city took from 2008 until today to make our downtown as safe as possible. After that, he's going to show about an 8.5 minute video that gives a pretty fair narrative to what we're dealing with in our downtown on a regular basis. We'll be exploring several potential modifications to our current alcohol ordinance, which include, and for those of you that got a handout, I think we have handouts at the door. These are included on your handout. Require bars and restaurants to close at midnight. Require restaurants to close at midnight. Require restaurants in the central business district to close at midnight. And to hold all restaurants and bars that serve alcohol accountable for disturbances that start in their business. After the video, there will be a 30-minute public comment period with the following guidelines. We will hear 5 people who are opposed to modifying the ordinance. We'll hear 5 people that are in favor of changing the ordinance or modifying the ordinance. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes. So that's a total of 30 minutes for the 10 people. And each speaker must be a resident or resident of Jacksonville Beach or a restaurant owner in Jacksonville Beach. If you're not selected to provide public comment on that page that I just talked about, there's a written section at the end where you can write comments, suggestions, or concerns and submit that to the clerk before you leave. And remember that if an ordinance modification does take place, public comment will be taken from anyone who wishes to speak at the first and the second reading. So if everybody will have the ability to speak during that process. Once we get through the public hearing or the public discussion, then the council will conduct open discussion and determine whether or not an ordinance modification is in the city's best interest. And if so, the ordinance will be heard at 2 council meetings to be determined, and we'll announce that to the public right away. So that being said, I'd like to introduce our Chief of Police, Pat Dooley, and Chief, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The Mayor's requested that I give a brief summary, some bullet points on the incident that occurred on June 26, 2018, which resulted in the death of Mr. Leon Bennett. One thing I would like to note, the time of the incident was just slightly after 2 o'clock. The shooting took place about 2:28. There were 21 officers on duty in the downtown area. That includes extra duty officers and also the downtown Cape officers. The officers on viewed the original fight that started at about 2:15. That was in the area between the 400 block and 3rd Avenue North there on 1st Street. And that fight kind of moved up the street just a little bit. When officers finally arrived, it was starting to break up. And so people started going, some started going south, some started going north. It took place in the 400 block, 1st Street North, involving several people, including the victim and the suspects in the shooting. Post-fight, the officers kept a presence in the immediate downtown area. And then at 2:28 p.m., the actual initial first call came out for a shooting. The officers were originally called to and sent to the tavern at 3rd Avenue North and 1st Street. Their response time was 19 seconds from the time of dispatch to arrival. Officers were then sent to the correct location, which was the 100 block of 7th Avenue North, and they arrived there 39 seconds later. The victim was Leon Bennett, age 23, of Atlantic Beach. Our detectives worked diligently for several weeks to identify the suspects and obtain enough information to obtain arrest warrants for both subjects involved. One was for carrying a concealed firearm, and both subjects were issued arrest warrants for tampering with evidence. A couple of weeks later, they were both arrested in Hawaii. They were extradited back to Jacksonville yesterday, and they arrived here and first appeared in front of the court yesterday afternoon. There are additional charges possibly pending in the future against both of them. So,
Chief, before you go into
yes, sir.
the next step, you had mentioned that the shooting call came out at 2:28 p.m. I think you meant a.m.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir. 2:28 a.m. The other part that you've asked me to to talk about this evening is to kind of give a little bit of a chronological history of, since 2008, what we've done, not just as a police department, but as an entire city in the downtown area to try to get some of the problems that we know we have down there under control. So if you would indulge me for just a couple minutes, and I'm going to read from the bullet points because this is a detailed chronological order of things that occurred. In 2008, the Downtown Cape program was assigned 2 officers on a full-time basis with the initial Downtown Cape program. The intent of the program at that time was to enhance safety in the downtown area. In 2009, the program was expanded to include 2 additional police officers, this bringing obviously the number total to the Downtown Cape program to 4 officers. Later in 2009, the City Council approved a pilot paid parking program in the downtown area. An additional police officer on an overtime basis was assigned to work the downtown parking program on an overtime basis in the 3 downtown parking lots. When those paid parking lots were in effect, there were no car burglaries or incidents in those parking lots. So that did do what it was intended to do with paid parking in downtown. Downtown Cape officers began to work with businesses in the downtown area in crime prevention and started training and code enforcement. The officers patrolled the area on the beach with ATVs and utilized bicycles and segways throughout the downtown area. From March through the middle of July, 5 additional detectives from the community response team were redirected from all of their other efforts and directed only to the downtown area to reduce the mandatory overtime and augment officers in the Downtown Cape program. In 2011, the City Council passed the extended hours permit requirement for alcohol establishments that chose to sell alcohol after midnight. This ordinance placed stringent requirements upon alcohol establishments to be more responsible in their service. Violators are required to appear before the magistrate and face losing their ability to serve alcohol after midnight for violations. The Downtown Cape unit and agents from the Florida Department of Alcoholic Beverage and Tobacco work numerous enforcement details in all of the establishments each year. They look for underage service, over-service, and ensure that all the rules are being followed. Downtown Cape officers continue to work with the businesses in the area of crime prevention and utilize the principles of crime prevention through environmental design, which is considered to be the acronym of CEPTED, in an effort to reduce crime. Every business in the CRA has a specific officer assigned to them as a liaison, and the officer visits the business weekly to answer questions and try to solve problems for the business owners. The officer also advises the businessmen of issues in crime and trends, if any, in their area, if there are at that time. In May of 2013, a corporal position was added in the Downtown Cape unit. The corporal was able to provide supervision and direction to the officers in the program. In fiscal year 2014, 3 additional officers and a sergeant position were created for the Downtown Cape unit. In 2017, an additional corporal and an officer were added to the program. This brought the staffing level to a total of 11, which allows for the unit to be broken into 2 work groups, much like patrol, with an overall sergeant supervisor in charge of the unit. In 2017, in an effort to allow the businesses which have outdoor dining to enhance the outdoor dining experience, the low volume outdoor and amplified sound permit or ordinance was enacted. The Downtown Cape unit works with bar owners and establishments to create responsible service training for any alcohol establishment that wishes to participate. In 2017, funding was approved to purchase an extensive camera system for the downtown area. The cameras became operational in July of 2018. Regarding the code enforcement for the Downtown Cape, officers work with businesses to correct code violations in an effort to prevent violators from appearing before the magistrate. However, in some cases, owners have not taken required corrective action and violations were issued and referred to the magistrate. Both Downtown Cape and the Carver Center program work closely with the Mission House to provide services to the homeless population, medical care, and assistance in finding housing. Both the Downtown Cape and the Carver Center Cape program also work with BEAM, the Beaches Emergency Assistance Ministry, to obtain assistance for residents in need of a variety of different services. So that kind of gives a little bit of an overview of how the Downtown Cape program started, what those responsibilities of those officers has been, and I think how far we've actually come with the program. Question always comes up to us is are there enough police officers down there? My opinion right now is that we have a good number down there, and there's a fine line between how many are needed to maintain the crowds and yet not creating an environment that looks like we have a policeman every 10 feet. That can also be uncomfortable for some folks, and we're sensitive to that. But you'll see from our video that I'm about to show that the requirement that we have of the officers in the downtown area, and then at those closing times from usually about 1 o'clock, 1:15, till just after 2 o'clock until we can get that area closed out and some of the pedestrians cleared out of there. We take almost all of the resources that are available throughout the rest of the city and bring those into the downtown area as well to help maintain order in the crowd. You'll see in this video why that's sometimes necessary. So,
Before you play the video, we started the Cape program with 2 officers.
yes, sir.
And now we're up to 14?
11.
11.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so when this council first was seated, the 4 of us, we had in 2012,
4.
4. So we've gone from 4 to 12 in 5.5 years.
Correct.
Okay.
And then we continue now with those 11 that we have there. We transfer every spring those 5 community response team members from their detective duties and working drugs and vice, narcotics, those kinds of things, over to the downtown area where they basically go back into uniform and help augment the downtown Cape officers.
Okay, thanks, Chief. And before we run the video, as I mentioned in the beginning, we're going to allow public comment from 5 people that are in favor of supporting a modification to the ordinance, and 5 opposed. If you want to be one of the speakers, please get a card and just write your name and address and whether or not you're supporting or opposing that modification. Bring it up to the clerk, and we'll be good to go after the video. So, thank you. Madam Clerk?
She's going to start the video, Mayor. We're going to use the microphone to allow the system to be heard, and then I'll narrate when needed from the video.
Citations meant the bar could have been shut down early, but management here decided
work together on. You know, perception is everything, and right now the perception is that we're a Wild West downtown.
This is just another.
Is now asking other city leaders to vote for a plan that would close certain restaurants and bars with a certain type of a liquor license at midnight as compared to 2 a.m. He has admittedly gotten a lot of flack for that. Some people say it could potentially kill the businesses and hurt the customers here. But he says he is sticking by his plan. There's going to be a public workshop, a meeting at City Hall. That is scheduled for August the 18th at 5 p.m. Of course, we'll keep you posted. I'm in Jacksonville Beach. I'm Vic Nicolucci, Channel 4, the local station.
All right. This incident was just more or less a pushing match between a couple of females there. It didn't escalate, but we wanted to show you that this is one of the many things that goes on a regular basis. Let's see as this moves on. This is now First Street. This was a medical emergency that happened out on First Street. And you can see just from the number of people here for a simple medical emergency how potentially this could be problematic for us with the number of people involved. Just kind of giving you the number of people that are out. This is the fight that involved the shooting victim and also the shooters, which was very helpful to us in identifying them. This again is the fight that was out in front of Sydney. This haymaker this person throws here in just a second, that punched a police sergeant. That's why he's going to jail. You can also see from just kind of watching the crowd there, potentially it could be very, very dangerous. Just kind of shows some of the restaurants in the downtown area around 1 o'clock in the morning. And the crowds that are in there. Those were security officers, they were not police officers. This is a line to a restaurant on First Street at about 12:30 at night. And then this is the line to get into that same restaurant from the ocean front. This just shows the crowd in general. Heading down from the Ritz, heading towards First Street from 2nd Avenue North. This is the line to get into the Ritz, which is a bar. And this is the crowd at closing time. And all of these establishments dump all of the patrons out into the street between 1:30 and 2 o'clock. It's extremely difficult to get them moved and to keep them out of the street. Keep people safe, the fights break out. Start to see this from above at the Metropolitan. While we were videotaping that, this young lady decided that she was going to urinate in public. Then she didn't believe the police were the police. So she comes over and challenges the officer. So her friend here probably saves her from going to jail here in just a second. As they turn, there's 2 other females a little further down in the Metropolitan there, urinating in public. They're being approached by the security guard there for the Metropolitan. This is a fight that breaks out in the middle of the street on First Street and 3rd Avenue North. Police come across the street, and one takes off running. That hissing would be a taser deployment, and he's arrested down there for the breach of peace. This is an individual that had been, we'd already contacted her for medical. She refused medical transport, as did her friends. They were going to take her home. I guess at this point they were waiting for their friend to come get them. because the cabs would not take her. This was a bartender at a local establishment, a restaurant, who went out after several other patrons after they engaged in a fight inside the restaurant. She got the worst of it. This is also one of our local restaurants. It's telling the undercover, no food. This is at approximately 1:05 in the evening on a Saturday. No food, only drinks. Why not? Look around. So they closed the kitchen at 11 is what hopefully you see there. The undercover informant. That's all I have there.
Thanks, Chief. Okay, I've only got a couple cards up here. Is there anybody else that wanted to speak? Now's the time. If you would come forward, get a speaker card and get it to the clerk. Today, we're exploring pretty much what options make sense for us to consider as a, what type of modification would make sense. There's several different options that were addressed on your flyer, and just again to reiterate, those are to require bars and restaurants to close at midnight, to require restaurants to close at midnight, to require restaurants in the central business district to close at midnight, or and or hold all restaurants and bars that serve alcohol accountable for disturbances in their business. So we had an opportunity to hear the chief. We've had an opportunity to look at the videos. We're going to give a few of you a couple of minutes here to give us your thoughts and feelings. And I think the first card was Mr. Evan. Is it Rita? Right? Yeah. Evan, if you come forward, give us your name and address. We'll have 3 minutes, sir.
Good evening. Evan Wright, 723 6th Avenue South. Sorry if I get a little nervous. I'm not, I get stage fright. So anyway, Chief, appreciate the video and the hard work you guys do down there. For the record, I oppose the ordinance change. I think there's a lot of misconception, for, on behalf of, the restaurants really just get painted with a very broad brush. People down here may perceive restaurants as, they're doing something wrong because they're staying open until 2 a.m. Well, there's a lot of municipalities where restaurants, all over America, they stay open until 2 a.m. So I don't see, what the big deal is. And for the past 10 years, I've, witnessed bullying, up here to the restaurants only. It's like, you guys are doing the bad thing, but, we're busting our tails. We provide more jobs. There's good operators out there. So when you do something or plan on doing something that affects multiple businesses, you have to look at everybody, not just one side, not just the side that says, oh, hey, it's okay if we just take the license away from the restaurants, because they're the bad operators. Yes, there is a couple bad operators in Jacksonville Beach right now. I'm not going to name any names, but that's not to say that, we're not all on the same side of the fence. We have a problem with that too. We don't want that. That video showed a little bit of a clip at Ocean Grill. Those were people we didn't allow in, not people that were just waiting in line. Those were people that, we don't want the riffraff either. It's just what it is. And it seems to me that we have, it's clear we have a problem. We just have to identify the problem. And the problem is during the peak hours, it gets overwhelming. It's a lot of foot traffic that comes in from in town. We're the only public beach that, they can go to, and, it is what it is. So what you have to think is, how can we solve the problem, for those 10 hours? And that's not necessarily to just take the license away. We're all willing to chip in and help. All the good operators out there, everybody's ready to chip in, do our part, do what we need to do, okay? And it could be one of a couple different ways. We can do the ambassador program, which I've been saying for years. We could do the, where we have these like you said, those weren't officers, but, you know, they were armed security. They help. It helps with you know, deterring things from happening. The other way that we can help is you guys give us some kind of authority to create an association, you know, where the collective businesses in Jacks Beach, you know, we all just kind of keep an eye out and say, hey, look, you guys are doing something wrong, and, you know, you guys got to fix that. You know, I mean, you'll be surprised how much willing to help, you know, because there's this misconception that there is two sides to this: the residents and the businesses. But that's not the case. You know, we're all in the same boat here. We don't want that stuff happening. I mean, so I just, like I said, I mean, just give us the opportunity to help fix the problem.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it, guys.
Robert Jones. Mr. Jones is opposed, and if you'll come forward and give us your name. I'm sorry, actually, Mr. Jones, we're not accepting speakers from Jacksonville, only Jacksonville Beach. You'll get an opportunity during the process if we go to council for an ordinance modification. Mr. Giebenauer, are you representing somebody that's a business owner in Jacksonville Beach?
Yes, Mellow Mushroom, John Valentino.
If you would come forward. If you would come forward, give us your name and affiliation, and you'll have 3 minutes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. Steve Giebenau. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Valentino that owns the Mellow Mushroom on 3rd Street. Mr. Valentino is out of town and asked me to relay to you his appreciation for having the workshop and giving him the opportunity to share his thoughts. Clearly, he understands that there's an issue in Jacksonville Beach. Any reasonable person would agree that something needs to be done to address the issues that were shown on the videos, and that no one that's reasonable would agree that things should stay the way they are. He very much appreciates the relationship that he has with the Jacksonville Beach Police Department. His restaurant's been here for quite some time, and he feels like he has a great working relationship with the police department on noise issues. Whenever they need help, the police are always there to work with them. But he also believes that going to an extreme example of just closing restaurants at midnight or limiting their ability to serve a full complement of services is a pretty extreme issue. Now, obviously, we don't have a specific piece of legislation in front of us to talk about, so it's hard to take a position on something when we don't have any details. But what he asked me to share was that there are lots of other enforcement tools available. We heard some issues, for example, on the video about kitchens not being open or food not being served. Well, if that's true, there are other things that can be done, either at the local level or the state level, to remedy those situations. And so there are other steps that can be taken short of closing down restaurants or limiting the amount of services that they can provide prior to enacting legislation that's extremely draconian. And when you think about the legislation, the other thing that really needs to be taken into account is if you implement legislation that takes away a service, you really have to give special thought to what the difference is between a bar or a restaurant or these different liquor license holders. Because when you implement something, the burden is going to be on the city to prove that a restaurant liquor drinker is different than a bar liquor drinker, which is different than a package store liquor drinker. So that when you close one type of business, it's justified, but you're allowing a different business to stay open. You have to distinguish, because you saw in the video, some of those fights were outside of bars. The call that was mentioned by the chief was to a bar, not to a restaurant. And so, you know, it's dicey when you start drawing lines on which businesses can stay open, which ones can be closed. And so you have to be very thoughtful about that. Mr. Valentino, again, I think what he would ask is that, again, recognizing that there's a problem, he appreciates the first step of having a workshop, similar to the last speaker. What he would ask is that maybe there would be some type of a working group that includes not only the elected officials and the staff at the city, but and obviously the police department, but also the businesses, to really try and work on specific issues that everyone can buy into. And I know that some of that's been done in the past already, but he believes there may be room for additional improvements that the businesses can work on, and probably with the state as well. If it costs more money, you have a system in place that allows to charge a little bit more for those licenses after midnight. If that's part of the solution, he's open to that. But rather than just taking a draconian step of shutting off some businesses, he appreciates the opportunity to work together with the city and look for solutions.
Thank you, Stephen, I appreciate it. Marcida Robinson, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, great. If you come forward, give us your name and address, you'll have 5 minutes, or 3 minutes now.
Marcida Robinson, I'm with local dog Chuck's Beach Urban Hall. The address of the business is 222 First Street North, or North First Street, here in Jacksonville Beach. I've been here for 3 years in April, and I operate a restaurant / event hall. When I first
What's the name of it?
It's a Locals Dock and Jack's Beach Event Hall. So when I first started, when I first opened my business, I was asked to do something different, and those were some of the talks that I had with the landlord and with some of the city, people. I got a few phone calls and this and that. So I came up with Event Hall, which is perfect. Weddings, birthdays. There's nothing more family than events. And I came into an issue with the parking. I asked a couple of questions like, can I get, can I have a bride prepaid? Sorry, I'm a little nervous.
That's okay.
Can I have a bride prepaid for parking spots, and we'll control like how I hold them and stuff for this. They're paying for them just like if a car sat there the entire day. And I was in a way denied, said no. Then I do weddings right in front of my venue on the beach ceremonies, and volleyball nets went out. So now I have to go 3 ramps down to do a wedding almost by 4 points, and walk a bride from my place all the way over there to have her wedding. Many of my brides in the summer, they choose to have a later wedding, 6:30, 7, a lot of them. And I do weddings almost every weekend, sometimes 2 a weekend. And closing at 12, who's going to want to book a wedding with me? Because if they're here, if their wedding is at 6:30, by the time they come into the event hall, by the time they do pictures, you're talking ceremony pictures, everything. By the time they come into the event hall, you're talking 7:30, almost, maybe even 8 o'clock. So 4 hours puts them at 12. If I have to get them out by 12, I got to start getting them out at 11:30. So who, again, is going to want to book an event with me? I already have the parking issue to face every day. That's the second asked question. Other than if I have the date available, the next question is, what can you do for parking? Which my answer is nothing. It's public. And that's great, and it's just go find your own parking. But again, we're talking, I read somewhere, and this might not be 100% correct, but like it just said, out of 36 licenses, only 12 close late. And then it said only 2 or 3 are the problem. So if we look at those numbers, so we're talking about 2 or 3 and closing everybody else, including me, those events and weddings and birthdays and family stuff, Christmas time, New Year's Eve. I don't have like a big New Year's event. I have families that book it, and it's been the same family for 2-3 years in a row that books it. But if I have to close at 11, again, who's going to want to book that event?
Thank you, Ms.
Yeah.
Ms. Robinson.
Thank
If I'm not mistaken, your website says you close at 10 o'clock. That's not correct.
The restaurant side, yes, but the event hall, when I have a wedding, I allow them to stay later, yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ken Marsh. Ken, if you come forward, give us your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes.
Ken Marsh, 2027 Gale Avenue. First of all, I'm a very strong supporter of the proposed resolution to reduce alcohol sales in the CBD. Based on that video, desperate times call for desperate measures, and it's unfortunate that we're even having this meeting. But I thank the council for addressing the public safety risks that we have in our midst right now. One thing should be made clear, though, this is not going to fix everything. It will just simply start rebranding what we want to become. I want to relate to you on Saturday, July the 21st, my wife and I, at 5:30 p.m., my wife and I took a drive downtown. First thing we saw was someone being handcuffed in the Sneakers parking lot. We continued north on 1st Street, and it looked like a ghost town, from Sydney's to Ocean Grill. No lines forming outside any of these businesses waiting to get in at dinner time, 5:30 p.m. No crowds milling around as they waited to get called on their tables. We continued on to Atlantic Beach, Neptune Beach. What do you think we found? It was hopping, okay? Vibrant. And you have to ask yourself, what's the difference? And the difference is we lack true restaurants. So if the restaurants want to help, the first thing they can do is be restaurants, okay? And so we say, you know, by obligation, they're supposed to sell 51% of the gross revenues from food. So let's give that a sniff test to some of the restaurants on First Avenue, First Street, Habibi, Ocean Grill, Pier Cantina, Sydney. I hate to call them out by name, but they've already been called out in the Beach's leaders. So here's what we got. Take a look at those. When was the last time that anybody in this audience went there for brunch or lunch or took their significant other for dinner? Okay? You know, it really doesn't pass the test on whether it's a true restaurant. Let's do a compare and contrast with other top fours in Jack's Beach. Pier Cantina versus Taco Lou. Sydney's Australian Bar versus Outback. Ocean Grill versus Salt Lake. Habibi, which doesn't have a Mediterranean counterpart, but let's call small business like Milano's, Buddha's Belly, Gusto's, all top 4 SRXs. I feel pretty comfortable in saying if they were downtown, we wouldn't be having this workshop today, okay? Those businesses, if they look at the other 28 local 4 top SRX, they're making money because we're going to hear this is impacting their profits. I tell those businesses, don't be myopic. There are other ways to make money. Citizens of this community are driving by the CBD on a daily basis at lunch, breakfast, dinner, and they're going to other places. These businesses can make money. They need to change their models. They do not need to leave. They need to change their models. So thank you very much. I hope that you will pass this resolution. It needs to be passed.
Thank you, sir. I got one last speaker for the opposition. I'm really sorry, I'm having a hard time. Manjola?
Yeah, it's Mignola.
Mignola.
It's okay. Everybody knows. Hi, guys. My name is Mignola Raita, and I'm the Ocean Grill owner. I'm also a resident here in Jack's Beach. I have a house at 731 6th Avenue South. So not only do I represent the business owner, I also represent being a resident. So, thank you very much, sir, for all your service and all the work you guys do. I know, I just heard my restaurant thing, and I find that very offensive, because if you're not walking into my restaurant to actually see the menu and actually be served, then maybe you should speak on my restaurant. Because stating that fact like that, stating that, especially when you're throwing numbers 5149, I can prove everything that I am a fully restaurant that serves mostly food. So yes, I take offense to that. That being said, I have been there for 5 years now. And I know a lot of you don't know me because I'm not, like I said, I'm not good. I'm also a little bit nervous. I'm not good with speeches, just when the camera is over there. But I've been here 5 years. And maybe the first year and the second year, I was still new and still kind of figuring out the city and what works. But then I thought to myself, you know what? If I sit down with the police, and they're here, so they can actually talk to me. I can actually sit down and see what do I need to do on my part to make, to make sure that everything goes the way it's smooth and everything is part to the beach. So I sat down. We sat down. I took their points. They took my points. I am the restaurant who teaches, who gets their employees certified on alcohol awareness handling, how to handle it, how to not overserve, how to spot fake IDs, how to do everything that it's about alcohol. I've had ABT do it for so long, and finally I went to the Jack's Beach Police because I figured that's a better, better idea what to do coming from them, and they've done the classes in my establishment. I also have hired, I have my own security. One of them is over here. That's the one who couldn't talk. I also have my own security that I've had from the beginning of the summer, and I will continue to have through the winter. Then I pay even whether I'm, whether it's this peak of the business or not. But on top of that, which you guys saw in there, what he said it was not a policeman, That is my extra security that I pay to be at the door to make sure that nothing bad or anything that didn't control the crowd, to make sure that everything goes smooth in my restaurant. And by the records, you can see. Now, am I oceanfront? Am I in the busiest area? Yes, sir, I am in the busiest area. So yes, I'm not Salt Life where you have to drive on 3rd Street to go to that restaurant. I'm literally the restaurant who's mostly visited by the beach goer. And so you can't say something like that, that, well, if you come to my restaurant, you see the menu, it is a full menu. So that means that yes, food costs to me, that food is the most important part to me. It's not the alcohol. But am I the one who 10 to 2? Do I get a good amount of
You need
people?
to wrap it up, please.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, sir. But I've done my part. So if I have to do my part, if I gotta go the extra mile to do my part, to work with the police, to do the extra item, then I should not be like, you know, a collateral damage to what you're, you know, to everybody's, what they actually have a problem with. So that being said, is if I would do anything that needs to be done, as long as I can communicate it instead of saying that, hey, we're just gonna take your license away. I'm more than open to
Thank
do
you.
anything.
Appreciate it.
No problem.
Anybody else wish to speak?
Mr. Mayor, could I fill out a card on my way out?
Yeah, you sure can, Jim. Can you make your way up to the?
Yeah.
First, I'm in favor of the ordinance. I think you don't go far enough. I think you ought to close First Street from 10 in the morning until 3 a.m. in the morning. And allow only emergency vehicles. If you close the restaurants at midnight, I think you ought to close the bars at 1 o'clock. And I think you ought to apply the solution to all of Jacksonville Beach. It's not fair to do it to some restaurants and not to others. Your big problem is alcohol, a little drugs, and maturity. And the other solution is just don't let anybody under 35 into Jacksonville Beach. Seriously, what you need to do is stagger the closing of the restaurants and bars and do it earlier in the evening. There is no reason why people would have to wander around drunk on First Street at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Jim, could you please give us your name and the address for the record?
I'm Jim Ogilvie. I live at 21 Burling Way in Jacksonville Beach.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Anyone else? The opposed are full, Fernando. So does anybody else support him? Good. Okay, come on up, Fernando. If you would, Fernando, give us your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes, sir.
Fernando Meza, 607 7th Avenue South, Jacksonville Beach, 250. I wasn't going to speak because you already know how I feel. It's not just my own sentiment, other bar owners as well. Now, you guys already know what's going on, but it's also a Jacksonville issue when the people from in town, the violence in town is spreading to Jacksonville Beach. It already spread to Town Center when those 3 individuals were shot. That originated a year and a half ago from that incident where they shot up a whole party and a 14-year-old girl was killed. That being said, what would have happened if those 4 individuals would have come to the beaches? You would have had 3 people shot, 1 in the hospital. Now, of course, you have some bad actors that are not really following the rules and slacking off. We have, the way I compared it is, bar restaurants have a CDL. Regular restaurants have a regular driver's license, and this is what I had to explain to some people. I'm like, well, if you have a CDL, you have to protect that license. You can't get a speeding ticket. You can't get a DUI. You lose that license. So for us, it's important to protect our business by any means necessary. If we have to be strict at the door, if we have to be stricter on over-serving and not over-serving, et cetera, and some of these places are just slacking off. And it's unfortunate that we have a lot more to lose if we get cited than some other places because they have the ability to serve food during the day. Now, if this was to pass, I'm in favor of it, but I just don't like it how it will affect the other good restaurants that stay open till 2 in the morning. Maybe, I mean, I've had conversations with our state representatives about this already, and they said they were going to look into it. You know, this, and of course, the violence that happens downtown, whether it's outside certain bars or certain restaurants, some of those people don't live here, which people are going to visit Jacksonville Beach no matter what. But it's unfortunate that the violence in downtown, or I mean in Jacksonville, is spread to Jacksonville Beach. Because Jacksonville Beach is not known for any violence. Maybe petty theft, drunk and disorderly. I mean, how often do we get murders here? Once a year? But it shouldn't be like that, because here in Jacksonville Beach, the residents, they're all good people. There's good people everywhere, but it's unfortunate that certain individuals want to ruin it for a community, a small home community that I love and I enjoy. And I know we're not about that. But I think we should just come together and maybe have more ideas. I mean, but that's just how I feel. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Fernando. Got 2 slots open for support. Anybody else want to talk support? Okay, in that case, we'll close the floor to public comment and move the discussion into the council. And I'm going to lead the discussion by a brief statement before we open the floor. Most of you know I ride with the police regularly every month or 2. And everything on that video was no surprise to me because I see it all the time. The officers have a lot to deal with. We've doubled the amount of officers in our Downtown Cape program over the last few years. Then I started getting phone calls from restaurants saying, hey, you're creating a police state down there. What are you doing? You know, the bottom line is we've transitioned from several different phases of this process. And right now we've reached the point where we have a public safety concern. When we have people that are bringing firearms into the street, it creates a problem. And it's not a commerce decision, it's a safety decision. And I think that's what I'm proposing here tonight, is that's how we look at this, as a safety issue. Any change that we make to an ordinance is something that we can modify later. If we've seen, you know, it's effective or it's not effective, we can modify it later. But we have to do something now. If you look at the number of licenses right now that are the 4 COPS or 4 COPSRX, there's about 35 of them. Out of those 35, there are, I think, 4 that close at 2 a.m. every day of the week, and the rest of them close at 2 o'clock on Thursdays and Fridays and Saturdays, and that's based on their own websites. That's where I'm getting that information from. We saw one incident of a restaurant that, on the last section of the video, when asked for a menu, said, we stopped serving food at 11 o'clock. Okay, I'll have that same person or that same bar will come up or a restaurant will come up and say, that's my best 2 hours. That's from midnight until 2 o'clock. You can't take those 2 hours away from me. So you're telling me that your food sales are greater from midnight to 2 o'clock in the morning? You know that's not the case. The issue here is what's fair and what's right. The people that own the quota bar licenses, the legacy licenses, the 12 businesses in Jacksonville Beach, I can tell you in my personal experience, which has been dozens of rides with our police officers from 5 o'clock Saturday evening until 3 o'clock Sunday morning, I've never once remembered any incident involving a bar. All the incidents involved restaurants. And every one of these restaurants converted into bars around 11 o'clock to midnight. And that's happening on a regular basis. And you can put as much lipstick as you want on a pig, but it's still a pig. And I'm here to tell you right now, there's no doubt in my mind that the first positive step that we take as a council is to safeguard the safety of our citizens. We have not just an obligation to do it, we have a moral obligation as elected officials to provide the safest possible environment for our citizens. So I feel very strongly that we move forward with this process. I feel very strongly that we make a modification to the existing alcohol ordinance. My recommendation, and I'm prepared to listen to everybody else, and certainly this is a joint decision between the 7 of us, but my personal opinion is we should require the 4 COPSRX inside this central business district close at midnight. Every 7 days a week, close at midnight. So that's my take. What do you guys have to say? Ms. Wilson.
Mayor, could we have Chief Dooley or someone explain what the current regulations are about getting the permit and
Sure.
how we're enforcing that and how do we monitor that?
Essentially, any restaurant can apply for an extended hours permit for CFP SRXs. They can apply for the city's extended hour permit. Unless there's a reason for them to be denied the state ordinance, they're automatically going to be issued that extended hours permit. As far as enforcement goes, if we encounter someone who walks out the door with a drink or something like that, obviously those are easy catches for us. If we're going to go into the restaurants and monitor their food sales, things like that, it's much more difficult because we have to take officers that would normally be working in uniform, put them in plain clothes, work with our confidential informants or people from the beverage department when we can get them out here, which is maybe once or twice a year, and get them to work with us to police those. It takes us, really, believe it or not, several weekends to get through all of the restaurants and bars, because we don't just hit restaurants, we don't just hit bars. We try to make sure that we're fair and equitable, so that we go to every location. We don't just pick on one or two. I know some people think we might do that. That's not the case. I can show where if we've gone to one in the CDB over a period of the next few weeks, we'll go to all of them. But it's labor intensive, and when I take those officers and have to put 4 or 5 of those officers in plain clothes to work to find violations inside of the establishments, then that's fewer officers that I have on the street that are in uniform. So when I have that crowd dumping out at 2 o'clock in the morning from both the restaurants and the bars, it makes it much more difficult to control those crowds. So that's kind of the quagmire of the enforcement part of it. It's difficult to enforce. We have had, since the conception of the alcohol ordinance, we have had 7 establishments that have had their extended hours permits suspended by the magistrate. Those have all been SRX licenses. None of those have been full bars, quota licenses. Does that answer your questions?
Yes, so you're saying that we have an ordinance that we don't have the capability to enforce?
We do enforce it, but we can't enforce it every weekend to the extent that it would take to monitor when people are not following all the rules.
So if they have their license suspended for the extra after hours, then for how long, and can they be reinstated, or what's
Yes.
the process?
Generally, the first offense is 30 days, but it's up to the magistrate. The magistrate has the ability to go up to 90 days on the first time they're in front of the magistrate, and I believe that has happened in the past. But generally, it's 30 days. Right now, I believe we have 1 under suspension that's currently active under a suspension of their permit. There might be a couple others that might be pending right now with the magistrate for the next month's hearings. But over the course of the time that permit has been in place, like I said, we've had 7 suspensions that have gone to the magistrate. And of those, all of those have been SRX licenses. None of them have been quota licenses. And I think that's relevant.
Okay, and then the other issue is the 51% food, and how do we get more alcohol and tobacco officers here to monitor that? Because that's a state thing.
Yes, it
and I know
is.
that your officers cannot monitor
We
that.
cannot
because you can't
monitor
go
that.
in.
Even if we had the manpower and the ability to do it, the state will not allow us to do it. And that's because the state regulates that themselves. If someone, for instance, if we have information that a restaurant is not serving food properly or something to that effect, we can report that to the beverage department. If we don't have like a video here, this video evidence of it to prove it, they won't make a case. They may come out and do an inspection themselves or send their own undercovers in there, but if they don't get the violation that particular time, they're not going to come back for at least probably a year, maybe 2, because they don't have the personnel to keep coming back and doing these kinds of details just in one city. They have like, I think 8 agents for 21 counties, something to that effect.
So they're understaffed also.
They're way understaffed, yes ma'am.
So if they cannot command the sales receipts from a restaurant saying, okay, how much?
Well, they used to come out and do spot inspections on those, and they did spot audits on the scene.
Right.
They did them unannounced. Now establishments, I believe it's 2-week notice, and they ask them to send those to them, and they do them off-site.
So they can send whatever they want to send in? to the
Possibly.
owners?
I'm sure some are very legitimate. I'm sure some probably have ways to make changes if that's what they choose to do. And I've not heard of any of the beverage departments, or any of the audits the beverage department has done, finding any exceptions to those audits. So, take that.
If I could just add, in the same discussion, when early on, I asked about the beverage department and what the enforcement opportunities were and what their frequencies were. And I remember very vividly, you told me at one point, shortly after I had started asking those questions, that they had said very clearly that if we give them a lead to a bar and they get out there and can't find a problem, just say goodbye. We're not going to be back.
No, that's correct.
So, I mean, that's our primary enforcement for the prerequisites for maintaining that 4COPSRX license.
Correct.
Okay.
The beverage department does a pretty good job of going after people that might be drinking in public or actually underage drinking at big events. I mean, they'll come out to our special events and go through, and every now and then they might find somebody that's underage, or they'll go out and walk on the beach and find underage people. I know you saw them there on the 4th of July this year. They were coming out looking for people underage. They do a really good job with that, but I don't think they do as good of a job when it comes to actually going into the restaurants and the bars and making sure that everybody's playing by the same set of rules, or the rules that their license allows them to play by.
Right, okay, thank you. That seems to be an issue, again, enforcement, not
Absolutely.
only by the police, our police department, but with the alcohol and tobacco.
It's everywhere.
So, and then my next question, if I may, is for our city attorney. Can we legally do this in one area like the central business district without affecting the whole city, or do we have to make it a blanket, the whole city is affected, any business, and the whole city has to abide by this rule?
Well, the suggestion I would have is to try to direct whatever legislation we have to the problem. Where is the problem occurring? And how are we going to stop it? What I'm hearing is a public safety concern. So are we having public safety concerns in the CBD, Central Business District? Are we having them outside? What are we trying to solve here? And if we have evidence showing, like the evidence we just saw, that we have some significant safety issues in a certain area, and that it perhaps is overtaxing our law enforcement department, and that is what we're hearing, is that our law enforcement department is struggling to handle these crowds when they're being let out of the restaurants and the bars at the same time. So one of the concepts is to have a tiered system where the restaurants would maybe close at an earlier time, and hopefully they could disperse, and then the bars would let out at a later time, and that would provide a safer community. So if we direct the legislation or the ordinance to that, we could do that. Now, under the laws, if frankly we could repeal 4-2, our alcohol code, and every bar and every restaurant by state law would need to close at midnight. So we're allowing or accommodating these businesses to stay open until 2 a.m. And the system that we currently have was designed to deal with some of the problems that we were seeing back in 2011 when we first passed this ordinance. And we were trying to direct the ordinance to the problems that we were seeing from particular businesses. But we just saw a video, and that shows you how well our ordinance is working.
So you say that we could limit this just to the central business district?
You could if you have the right evidence. And the evidence needs to show that that's where the problems are, and if we shut down or if we close, require, for instance, SRX licenses to close at midnight, and we can show that we have a public safety need to do that, then we have a good basis to make a distinction inside the CBD. And some of the challenges you've heard about here today is that there are good businesses and there are businesses that are not doing what
just flow out into the streets and continue at one of the other establishments. You know,
Thank you.
liquor license.
Thank you.
Can I address that? To some degree, yes. The bars, I think most of the bars on the weekends operate pretty close to capacity. You see the lines that are out there for those bars. They are very, very cognizant of what their fire restrictions are for the number of occupants each building is allowed to have. So there are lines at the bars, and there's probably going to continue to be lines at the bars. But if we have the restaurants closed, say at midnight, some of those people may go and wait in line to get into a bar, but they can only fit so many people in the establishments that we have in the downtown area. So for a while, we may wait in those lines, and other times, I think they're going to figure out that, you know, it's going to take me more than 40 minutes to get in there, more than an hour to get in. It might not be worth it. I can't say for sure what's going to happen with the crowd, but I know, and I think that by watching the video, if you see the number of people, I mean, those are streets that all that is happening in. It's not sidewalks, those are streets. They become impassable because of the pedestrian traffic, but the cars are still going down the street, and it's designed to, you know, thank goodness the traffic goes very slowly. We have a lot of officers out there, but that's also how all those fights start, because so many places are closing at one time that all those people are filing out into the common areas at one point in time, and that's one of the things that's created a major, major safety concern for us. That's when the fights break out. That's when the officers are getting hurt. You're going to find that we have a lot of use of forces during that period of time. So that's when our biggest problems occur, right there at the closing time for all of the establishments at the same time.
But just because they leave the restaurant doesn't mean they're actually going to leave the area, though. That's it. They're already probably intoxicated. But you know, I really empathize with the situation that you have there.
This has been done in other areas, and I'm trying to think right offhand. If you can remind me, Karen, I know that you went through the same organization with Mr. Peters that I did, that showed where they've done this in other locations and had these staggered closing times, and it has helped. It's not the magic wand. It's not going to fix, much like Mr. Marsh said, it's not going to fix all of our problems, but it's a step in the right direction to start to make a change, so that we can kind of limit the number of people that are down there and balance it out a little bit better.
Okay, thank you. I just have one other comment right now. I just have a concern about a broad brush that punishes everyone for a few people that are, you know, a few problems that we have in the downtown area. So if it's citywide, that would be a problem, and I think maybe lawsuits. So just, I think we need to be very careful how we do it and if we do it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Buck?
Yes, Chief Dooley, I'm going to ask you a couple questions.
Sir.
Which has to do with our city attorney. Number one, I just took a walk through downtown at about 1 in the morning, and would you have any estimate of how many people are down there at 1 in the morning, tying in with the Central Business District? I mean, you couldn't even hardly maneuver through that crowd.
Certainly
wall-to-wall people.
3,000. I mean, it's an estimate, but it's certainly more than, I would think, a couple thousand people on the busier nights down there.
It's incredible. If Ms. Wilson would take a walk through there 1 in the morning, it's not a family place to be. I assure you of that. And that's really all I have. But I do have a question for our council here. I'm all for, see, in 2011, we had restaurants where we had to get them to, they were moving all their tables and making room for people to consume alcohol. But here a few years later, more than a few years, we've got the same problem. And how much burden is there on us to show that the burden is really in our Central Business District and not at Mellow Mushroom or whatever.
what is the burden on us to make it exclusive of, inclusive of the central business district?
Well, our duty would be to treat similarly situated businesses similar. And that's why I say we have to, if we are going to have different treatment in the central business district, we have to show that we have a problem there that we're trying to solve that doesn't exist in another area. I don't know if we're having lots of law enforcement calls to the outlying restaurants. That's more of a...
Anecdotally, I'm in the process of pulling statistics citywide, but no, we're not having near the number of calls for service at other locations that we have in that central business district. So the answer to your question is no, it's a different set of problems outlined.
So what the law looks at is what is the problem the community is trying to solve? And if the problem is what you saw on the video, violence, excessive crowds, to the point that it's unsafe, where in this situation, we've literally had people bleeding in our streets. I mean, we have photographs of people with blood dripping, and we've had people shot and killed down here. I don't know if we're having those problems in other areas of our city, but if the evidence shows that we're not, then a court would support directing our attention to the central business district if that's where the problems are by the sheer crowds and the public safety concerns.
Well, I think the police chief just illustrated that their focus, fortunately, they have to bring more people into the business district from outside. That would include the outside restaurants. Am I correct? Just to
Yes, sir.
Just to control the central business district.
That's correct. Usually from about 1:15, any of the cars that are available in the outlying areas, unless they're already on a call for service, generally start to move into the downtown area to maintain a heavy presence down there. It's not a standing order or anything. That's just what the sergeants do because we want to try to alleviate problems proactively. So our presence in some cases does that. But in other cases, you can see in that one fight, police were right there on the corner and they didn't care. They're going to duke it out right in the middle of the intersection. So it doesn't necessarily mean that because the police are there, the problem's not going to exist.
Well, one thing I think you already illustrated, and that's the people, and I won't mention names because one of them's on council, but the people that do have the licenses to serve until 2 generally, or hopefully not just generally, they do control the number of people that can get within their premises.
And you're talking about the 12 quota licenses?
Right.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
They pay, you know, and I put that in my summary, the cost of those licenses is very, very different. As Mr. Meza explained earlier, they have a lot more skin in the game, actually, I think, because the value of that license, they can't afford to lose it because then they can't sell alcohol at all. They're out of business, obviously. But we have not had any suspensions at any of the quota license establishments since the inception of the ordinance. And it's not because we haven't tested their system any more or less than any of the other establishments. Some of them have received warnings, but they're or first notice of violation, but nobody's received the second in the required time frame to go in front of the magistrate. So.
Thank you. I don't have anything else.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Hoffman?
Yes, you can stay there. I'm wary of creating new legislation on something that maybe is already there, that we could already either better enforce or do differently or look at differently. So just wanted to ask a few questions on that. You mentioned the CAVE officers work with the businesses downtown for training on alcohol service and things, but you said voluntary.
Right.
So how many of the downtown businesses are participating in that, would you say? Or
Can I,
ballpark it?
Brian or David?
There's probably, the last one we did was about a month and a half ago, and we probably had about 8 to 10 businesses.
8 to 10 different businesses. And some of them do them multiple times per year. Some will do them once a year. Some will do it when they get new employees, usually always in the spring. So it varies, but no, it's not a requirement.
Can we make it a requirement within the confines of the alcohol permit?
I would imagine if you choose to do that, yes, that would be a question for the city attorney, but I'm sure if you choose to legislate that, you could.
Within the existing alcohol, 12 to 2 o'clock alcohol permit, would we be able to require they go through annual training?
Right, because as it now stands, unless if the businesses apply for an extended permit, they have to close at midnight.
Right.
So the price of obtaining an extended permit is to meet the criteria that we have, and that could be added. By law, the cities are limited to addressing the hours of operation, the location of the alcohol establishment, and of course, dealing with the public safety concerns that come from that.
But we're essentially granting them that 12 to 2, so we can put additional requirements on that.
We can try. That's a creative solution. We're preempted in many of these areas by ADT, which is why we can't solve the 51% problem.
Can we require higher security? Can we require them to use off-duty police officers like we do with the COPs?
We can do those things. It's difficult for me to guarantee that I'm going to have enough off-duty police officers.
That's not what I'm asking. Can we require it?
You could.
Okay.
You could. The question that comes up with security is how much is enough?
Right.
And what level of security are they actually providing? So there's questions with that, but there's a lot of details.
And I'm not saying that that's the answer, I'm just trying to go through that. The alcohol permit part of it, is there more that we could be doing with that before we do? And I'm not stating my position one way or the other, I just want to make sure we fully examine the options there.
It's possible.
And then I spoke with someone who's in the business, not in the central business district, but he mentioned a program where you get together with the health inspector, the fire marshal, zoning, and you kind of go do a full court press with the businesses and just kind of hit it all once. I know you said you do that with ABT.
We do it with code enforcement, and we also do it with the fire department.
What about health inspector?
We haven't done it with the health inspector, and that's probably because the city doesn't handle the health side of it. That's a state part with.
Well, it's a county office, but
right.
Is that not an option to?
It certainly is. It could be. We've just never included them. We've always gone after them for individual city code violations, not necessarily state health code. So
it's part of preparing for this.
Something we could include, yes.
As part of preparing for this meeting, I watched the bar rescue that was recently filmed in our downtown area, and I think some health inspection, and I know they're already doing regular health inspection, but I think in combination that might have been brought to quicker attention. And then the fire marshals?
Yes, the fire marshal does go out fairly regular with us now, and has in the past, but he looks at fire code violations for the physical property, the physical plant of the building, as well as the counts that are being taken for each establishment and the level of occupancy and those kinds of things.
Have we closed anybody down for violating fire code?
We have not closed them, well.
Like that night? Like for that
We've done a violation, but by our ordinance, the first violation does not go to the magistrate. They have to have a second violation within 90 days, and then they can go to the magistrate. So most of the fire violations are being corrected after the first violation, but we're still going back, and the fire marshal goes in and does his checks periodically to make sure that they're following up. Those violations through the fire code and also through zoning and any other ordinance violations, those all count toward a violation that could have potentially taken a business in front of the magistrate. So if they get a warning through the fire department or through the code enforcement officers, that could potentially take them in front of the magistrate as well.
Okay, thank you. Just finally comment, when I first ran for office, you can
Okay.
always sit down.
Thank you.
I don't, maybe someone else did that. When I first ran for office 6 years ago or so ago, I said to all of the current council members, I asked them what they saw as some of the biggest challenges in Jacksonville Beach, and without exception, they all said Rhinos, restaurants in name only, they all said it. So I'm very glad that, and it's taken us a while to get to this point to really address it head on, but I'm glad that we're here. One thing that I think is amiss is that we don't also have the Community Redevelopment Agency here, which is the organization that is charged with working on development and economic prosperity of our downtown area, and I think these all go hand in hand. And for me, there's a bigger picture here beyond just this problem, and that's that we need to also look at the bigger picture of our downtown and the fact that the brick and mortar really needs to change. When you look at these 2 a.m. Videos and the streets are packed, if you look at that same video at 6 p.m., it'd be a ghost town, as Mr. Marsh noticed. And then also, somebody mentioned creating an association of restaurants, downtown restaurants. You don't need our authority to do that, I wouldn't think. That you would only need the authority that the members of that organization would grant you, so I would definitely encourage that. But as far as the Community Redevelopment Agency is concerned, I think we have a lot of opportunity here. I think we've been really scared or timid or whatever to really reach out and utilize that opportunity. For example, we have 4 major properties for sale in the downtown business district right now. The property, Ocean Grill, the building that Blue Water and Locals, or sorry, Sydney Bar and Locals is in, Bo's Coral Reef, and the empty lot behind Jay Johnson Gallery. So there are 4 huge pieces of property that, if we play our cards right, could really change the face of downtown really quickly. And if we, again, if we do it the right way and we work hand in hand with the new business owners, could really be a positive thing for downtown. And I went and did some research on the Florida Redevelopment Association site, and they have a before and after. I know you can't see this, Jacksonville Beach. And from this perspective, the only thing different in this before and after is the pavers on First Street. And that's a very isolated picture, I understand that, but I think it's really time to start using the redevelopment agency the way that we can and should, and that is to work on the economic development and prosperity of our downtown. And if you look at job postings on the Florida Redevelopment Association website, one of the most common ones is an economic development coordinator. So we could have someone like that whose job it is to know these business owners, to know the people that are looking at opening a business in Jacksonville Beach, to work with them to come up with enticements or incentives to bring the businesses that we want in Jacksonville Beach here, and show that we're extending our hand out to the businesses instead of dropping the hammer on them, which we need to do it when we need to do it, but I'd rather take that full, long view approach to Jacksonville Beach, and that is all for my comments.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else? Mr. Wilson.
Kind of echoing, I guess, the last part of Chris's commentary is where I would go. I think that after this, I think that we should have a roundtable discussion with all of those businesses in the CBD, because if this were to even be considered, I think that would be where I would focus it. I wouldn't extend it beyond that. But I think that would involve some roundtable discussions, as Evan indicated, with everybody that has an SRX license in the CBD. I think that we should be open to all suggestions, discussions, everything before we just make a collective decision to shut it down. But as part of that, I also would want to be creative and aggressive in what do we need to do as a city for them to succeed as a restaurant if they closed at midnight. And that's where the incentive comes in. A lot of the places that have gone in there have started out as a restaurant and then they become a nightclub at night. And that's the transition that they've made partly because probably it's more profitable, I concede that, but I think a lot of it has to do with the way our city is structured and the lack of ability for them to create an environment like Atlantic Beach and Neptune Beach have, where they can have parking for customers to easily eat at those restaurants. So I think part of that discussion and roundtable discussion for me would be, let's start with, if we do take away the extended hours for those types of businesses, what can we do as a city to make up for that time that we're taking away? Whether that be give you city parking, leased parking, offer a valet service as a city that we pay for, offer other monetary incentives to fill that void. All of that would be on the table for me. We've talked about it since 2012 when we took council, that we want real restaurants operating and succeeding, and people bringing that type of environment for happy hour, after work, going to dinner, being able to take your family to true restaurants down there. And I think if that even costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, I'm in support of that, because that's the type of downtown that I think we should have. So I think that we should be very aggressive in our discussions and incentives in trying to build that. And like Ms. Hoffman alluded to, there's ample properties available for restaurateurs to come in. And we have a lot of successful restaurateurs at our beaches that I think that we could even reach out to for opportunities for them to come in and do a restaurant. But I think that would be part of a roundtable discussion with everybody that has those licenses before I just went ahead and said, okay, we need to take it away. I think that part of that would be, what can we do for you in order for you to be able to succeed if you did close at midnight? So that's kind of where I'm leaning. I don't know what your guys' thoughts on that would be, but it is a significant number of individuals that would be affected in the downtown area, and it is a problem. It's going to continue to be a problem, and I realize that, but I think the collective effort is at least warranted.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? My wrap-up comments. One of the things that came up during the discussion was that I think Mr. Wilson brought up the point that if restaurants were to close at midnight, where would they go? I think that there's an amount of people that would leave. There's several, I'm sure, that would try and stay, but the capacities for the bars aren't going to change. There's lines outside of those bars now, in some cases all the way around the block. So if those restaurants close at midnight, I don't think that they're going to be partying in the streets. I think they're going to go someplace where they can find alcohol. And if the lines are full in Jacksonville Beach and they're around the buildings, they're going to go somewhere else probably. I also want to mention, I took a lot of calls, and I say this with all sincerity, 100% of the phone calls that I took from residents were in favor of modifying the ordinance to do this. Some of you are in this room. That's the quiet group of people that don't want to call attention to themselves. And that's what we get paid to represent, is when those people call and stand up for them as well. So just because you're not hearing them here tonight doesn't mean that they're not out there and they're counting on us to do the right thing for the city. As we're going through these discussions, and especially as we were watching that video, the one word that kept going through my mind over and over again was Chicago. Chicago is waiting on their own for things to change. And they're not changing for the better, they're changing from the worse. We here cannot do that. We can't do that in our beautiful coastal community. We can't just wait for things to change. Quite frankly, we've done that for the last 5 years. And we've tweaked, and we've added a couple of police officers, and we've changed a couple of policies. And here we are right back to where we were when this all began. So I feel very strongly that it's time for us to take some action. The residential watches of the police officer, as I said, I ride with the police several times. When 1:30 rolls around and everybody comes downtown to escort people out of the area, many of which are every night, just like you saw in that video, all those police officers are being taken away from your homes, in your neighborhoods, and they're downtown, taking all these people and pushing them through the system to get them out of our area. And that's something that you should consider as well. I mentioned it before, and I just want to reiterate to the chief, my personal experience has been for the quota license holders. I don't remember one time that we've cited or had an issue that warranted this level of consideration. And the point is well made that they pay, was it $400,000 or something?
It's the market value of the license. And there's probably a councilman that could be, there's probably somebody that could be more informative than I am on it.
Okay.
My understanding is that the licenses can range anywhere from 200 to excess of 400,000, depending upon the market at the time.
And what are the 4 COPSRX licenses?
My understanding is they're about $1,500 approximately through the state.
And that further exemplifies, in my opinion, why the bar owners are so serious about making sure that they do things the right way, and the restaurants have $1,500 invested. Last thing I'm going to say before we wrap up, and I guess we got Mr. Buck has another comment. I'm going to read out loud. This is the list of SRXs in Jacksonville Beach, the 4 COP SRXs that advertise on their own websites what time they close. And these are the places that close at midnight or sooner, okay? Blind Rabbit, Bonefish Grill, Buddha's Belly, Casa Maria, not Marina, but Maria, Mexican, Carrabba's, Chili's, 11 South, 4 Point Sheraton, Gusto Italian Restaurant, Camia, Locals Dock, Longhorn Steakhouse, Milano's Italian, Momo's Kitchen, Outback Steakhouse, Roy's, Salt Life, Taco Lou, Tomo Japanese. These are successful, thriving restaurants in Jacksonville Beach. And there's no reason that the others can't be successful, thriving restaurants too. And I just have to say one last thing. I've seen it with my own eyes dozens and dozens of times. You can stand here till the sun goes around 100 times, but I'm telling you, a lot of these bad actors, which create the majority of these problems in our downtown, become bars around 11 o'clock. And why that's a problem is it intensifies the number of people that come into our community that's already overstressed from the people that are at the legitimate bars. And it creates that much more of a problem for our police officers downtown. So I feel very strongly that we continue to move forward. You know, most of us were elected together 5.5, 6 years ago, and we all said, as Chris said, the same thing over and over again. Downtown, we've got to get under control. We've got to get our downtown under control. Wishing's not going to do it. Waiting's not going to do it. We need to take some positive action to make this start to get better. Can we change it in a year? Maybe. You know, maybe we need to include restaurants. Maybe we can relax the SRX and let them go till 1:30 or 1 o'clock and stagger things out. Right now, we need to deal with a public safety issue. And that's exactly what we're facing, is a public safety issue. Mr. Buck?
I think we've had some good discussions tonight, and I do disagree with one thing, and that is on Atlantic and Neptune Beach. In that case, it was mentioned that parking is a problem. They've really got a big problem with parking, but anyway, we've been on this issue since I've been on council, on and off since 2004, and this has just gotten worse and worse. But it was mentioned these high-rises that are about to come in here, and they're just going to be a tremendous asset to our community. But the difference to me of Atlantic and Neptune and Jax Beach, and I do go to both, and tonight I went to a restaurant here that closes at 11, and they're quite successful. But when you go to Atlantic or Neptune Beach at 10:30, or, well, I don't eat that late, but anyway, when you go there, it's just family friendly. And I would challenge that everyone on this council ran to make this city more family friendly. If anybody here did not do that, good for you, but I don't believe it. We are not making this family friendly, not to restrict our downtown area restaurants be restaurants, and to me, midnight's enough.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Doherty?
Yeah, I just wanted to say for the record, I'm sure everybody's noticed my silence on the matter.
It's definitely.
I felt it back a few times, but yeah, I do have opinions on this, but I think in the interest of impartiality and because I may have a potential conflict in the voting outcome, I'm not available for public comment on this, nor shall be voting on it. But if anybody in the audience wishes to know my opinion or could be dangerous to pick my brain over this, I'm available for that. I'm not sure of my responsibilities as a representative. I just think in the interest of fairness that I, stay impartial in this.
Respect that very much. Thank you. Okay, it's my intent to bring forward through the city attorney, the chief of police, and the city manager a proposed modification to our existing alcohol ordinance unless there's at least 4 of you that object. Does anybody object to moving forward? This would put us in a situation where we go through the standard 2-read process. Public would be allowed to speak, and everybody get a copy of the ordinance before everybody would the Thursday before the council meeting. But the intent is what I recommended from the first minute here, and that's, I think we need to, for now, secure restaurants, the SRX licenses, and CBD at midnight. Any objections? Okay, so be it. This meeting is closed. Thank you very much.